Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the rise of programmatic out of home, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dom Kozak. Having worked there for over 9 years, Dom is now the head of programmatic at JCDecaux UK. He's a key figure in the digital out of home and programmatic out of home industry, and also recently won the AdTech Hero Award at New Digital Age's NDA Heroes Awards. Hi Dom, how's it going?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. I'm glad that the London weather has returned to something a bit more like normal compared to your last record, where I heard you both sweating away in your respective homes.
Yeah, slightly more manageable, I think, in the last week or so, hasn't it? I think we've dropped down by about 10 degrees. So yeah, can't complain too much. It's quite nice, even though still no AC. Maybe I'll need to invest in a unit next year, I think, but maybe not this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that the prices will be shooting up on our favourite retailers' websites, no doubt.
That's just the way that the world we live in now, isn't it? Just high inflation, 18%, isn't it? Next year, there's the flirting around with. So yeah, let's see. But no, thanks, Dom. Thanks for your time today on our podcast episode. Super excited to talk about the different topics that we had in mind. But just to begin with, it'd be great to understand a little bit about your career and kind of like your journey over the last kind of 9, 10, 12 years.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Dal. I mean, I guess I really consider myself these days a bit of a kind of out-of-home guy, which is perhaps weird in a digital programmatic space. And I've been at Decaux for like you said, just coming up to 10 years now, almost done my decade. I guess kind of before that, I was really in a kind of hardcore sales role, if you want a better description, at a publisher, which was very much transitioning from print into digital. And then following that, I worked at a startup as employee number 2. Again, a web publisher, transitioning from a kind of IO-based sales model into a programmatic sales model. So that's kind of always been in my blood a little bit. I guess that evolution, that growth, that change mentality. And I kind of joined Decaux slightly by accident, if I'm being perfectly honest, best part of 10 years ago. Just joined on a contract, looking to do something different, looking to learn about other bits of the industry. Absolutely fell in love with the business. I mean, we are still a family-run business, but a big global conglomerate at the same time. And there's just something about the way that working for JCDecaux is very much kind of a market leader, being innovative in their thinking. Just a really, really nice place to be. And certainly, I think probably about 5 years ago, we started to think about kind of how do we be part of the digital future? How do we transform this kind of traditionally upper funnel channel into a kind of more full funnel marketing channel? And I kind of sniffed that we were thinking about this as a business, and very much kind of got my nose in there. And really, I've been involved in the project since the start. So I look after kind of product, sales, commercial, the whole kit and caboodle, which is really, really exciting to kind of be at the forefront of it. And just to give you a kind of idea, so we started trading 4 years ago-ish, just over 4 years ago in a programmatic sense. And it was very much kind of, I don't want to say a one-man band, but very much kind of me doing that at the core of the business, but then supported by the wider sales team of sort of 80 to 140 people, depending on kind of ebb and flow and how you count it. And these days, 2022, we really are seeing the realization of the channel post-pandemic, perhaps not surprising, as we've kind of gone back outdoors and we're happy and looking up and seeing what's going on there. But so, yeah, we've gone, certainly in the last year, we've kind of rocketed up as a core programmatic expertise team, up to about 6 people, and again, supported by the wider business. So every single person at JCDecaux UK, and in fact globally, is really engaged in the programmatic space and is in one way or another, either bonused or involved or really part of the project. And we believe it is part of the future of out of home. It won't be the only part of the future, of course, but it's a really, really exciting place to be right now.
And would you say the programmatic adoption for out of home came a little bit later than some of the other channels out there, or do you think it was right at the front, middle? Where would you say it came about?
Yeah, I think it's it's definitely come a little bit later. In reality, if you kind of look at the cold hard facts of kind of when the tech was done and when the strategy was built, it was all kind of very much around the same time as programmatic audio, or a little bit after, and very much probably at the same time as CTV becoming a big thing. Now then, of course, we had this thing called the coronavirus. I don't know if you've heard of it, where we all kind of spent a couple of years in our front rooms, talking on screens and not really being out of home. And I think in a way that kind of slowed down the adoption of programmatic digital out of home. But it was also the catalyst for the growth that we're seeing this year. So in that kind of 2-year period, let's call it, it's not quite right. Obviously the out-of-home impact industry was massively impacted, down on revenue, having to rethink our structures and how we approach things. But what that also meant was that as JCDecaux, we'd kind of been out there on our own a little bit at the front of the pack. But what was great really was that during that period, it meant that the kind of buy side, the sell side, the tech vendors had a bit of time and a bit of space that you don't really get in a fast-paced moving media environment. But they had that space to kind of develop the ecosystem to kind of this robust, scalable proposition that we have today. So probably we're kind of 2 years behind where we thought we were going to be. But actually, that's probably going to set us up for a much better kind of acceleration into the future and really, bringing the best of both worlds of kind of what programmatic technology and data and measurement can offer, but to this, the oldest media in the world, which is out of home, driving that, broadcast. But now we're looking at precision, but with that broadcast scale. So it's really, really exciting.
And would you say that the channel of out of home and digital out of home, and when it comes to programmatic, especially programmatic, it's like any other channel. You still work with SSPs, you still work with DSPs. It'd be great to understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, purely from an ecosystem standpoint, 100%. So, as a media owner, as a publisher, I guess in the kind of more traditional programmatic display world, we work with one SSP with JCDecaux, which is View. View connects to your traditional DSPs that you trade through, the likes of the Trade Desk, Xandr, MediaMath, DV360, etc. Plus some point solutions in this space like Hivestack and Vistar, who are perhaps really well established in other markets as well. So the ecosystem works in very much the same way, and I guess that's really where the strength of programmatic out of home, where it really offers something a little bit different from a more traditional out of home sense. Out of home isn't broken at all, but now we can, like I said, move kind of down that marketing funnel. I mean, historically, out of home is very much focused on context, right? Obviously, you'll be big into context. We know context is king. A baker would put a sign with a loaf of bread on the side of their bakery to draw people in. Perfect kind of contextual example in that case. But now if you start to wind that out with programmatic, we can go a little bit more granular than that. So we start combining time with location. So really what programmatic brings is this ability to be much more real time, to be much more focused in that delivery. And that doesn't mean that we talk about reducing scale. What we're really talking about is that scale being more precise. I mean, out of home in the UK has got a reach of 98%. You can flip a button in your DSP and be live up and down the country on digital inventory, not just with JCDecaux, but with other media owners as well. I mean, it really is kind of the best of both worlds, as I think I mentioned before.
And then you're speaking to, I'm assuming, agencies, brand direct as well. What kind of teams are you speaking to? Is it the teams, the out-of-home teams that were used to traditional media, or are they digital teams you're talking to? Is it a combination of the two, or does it depend on the agency? It'd be good to understand who you and your team and the salespeople within JCDecaux, who are they talking to in the agency world?
Yeah, it's absolutely all of the above, right? So I think we've got my team specifically very much talks to, I guess, the digital market, if you like. So digital buyers who are more familiar with the kind of traditional display, AV channels, whatever they may be. But then we do also, of course, talk to our traditional out-of-home buyers. The poster specialists being one. They have a rich level of expertise and data that they can plug into the ecosystem. Now, it does vary from group to group, and it varies from team to team. Really, where we're seeing the greatest success is where those teams work together and talk to each other. Like any other channel, out of home is idiosyncratic, and it needs a bit of expertise and husbandry to really get the best out of it. So really, that's what my team does. So we'll either work with digital buyers directly, or we'll help kind of steward those relationships to make sure that we're getting the very best executions for the clients that we all work with.
And that team you have under your remit, are they very technical? Is it more commercial? How are they operating? And then how closely are they working with your wider sales team in getting that programmatic message out there and ensuring that, all the cogs within the chain are working and syncing as they should be?
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, so we very much are, we like to call it a center of expertise. And that means touching a little bit of everything, if you like. So we serve multiple functions. So we have kind of a direct sales function, if you like. So out there talking to agencies, talking to brands directly, specifically with the digital teams, and really kind of pushing or helping them kind of plan and activate campaigns and making sure that they're as educated as possible within this space. We then have a function which is also very commercial and sales based, but very much supporting the wider team. So, the team of, 80 plus people whose bread and butter is selling out of home. They know the channel brilliantly. We can then support them with some programmatic knowledge to help them with their kind of sale, with their approach, with making sure that we're achieving the best results we can for our client base. And then that flows all the way through into product and operations. So again, the operations and planning sits within the team. Although not the pure technical side of it, they're also very much the interface into the product and technical teams and our partners at the DSPs, of course, as well, to make sure those campaigns are integrated and running as smoothly as they should be.
Amazing. And for me, when I think of out of home, I think branding. You see some amazing executions, across the world, really, when it comes to digital out of home. Would you say the vast majority, is still branding? And have you seen that a slight shift into performance, or would you say it's branding? It's going to stay with branding for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that out of home is purely branding, but also I think maybe, performance is perhaps sometimes the wrong measurement and the wrong approach, right? So when we talk about performance, what are we actually saying? Are we saying sales? Are we saying clicks? Are we selling certain actions? I think there's an admittance kind of in the broader digital space that we've been measuring the wrong thing for a while, right? Your marketing campaign is not there to drive clicks to your website, or maybe it is in a very rare instance. Really, it is there to do things. It might be branding, it might be sell a product. So I think kind of making that absolute clear distinction between brand and performance is perhaps a little bit problematic. I think there's kind of this golden metric in the middle around kind of consideration and intent, where out of home is much more playing a part as the channel evolves, certainly programmatically, and then working with the different channels in the ecosystem. So let me bring that to life for you a little bit. So you might have, for example, as part of your out of home and broader strategy for a car brand, you might have, some TV running and some kind of traditional poster out of home, driving that kind of top of funnel branding awareness piece. But you then might also want to go, well, okay, so I know I've driven awareness, and I know from that information, or from the data I've got, that these geographies are more likely to perhaps go ahead and buy my product. So you might start to move down that consideration funnel and might really want to start to push a particular brand or a particular product line. And then even below that, you might go, okay, well, I now know that from exposed mobile device IDs, I know that these exposed IDs have been to either my particular showroom or my competitor's showroom. So they're probably considering buying an automobile. And then you can move further down that brand funnel and start to retarget or target geographies and times where you're seeing a spike in that particular audience set. So there you can see that you can kind of target all the way through down that brand funnel. You can then even add that into measurement and start to see, right, what was the actual footfall from exposed device IDs people who are exposed to the out-of-home advertising, then actually that we saw their footfall tracked to the store, and then you can start to analyse then what was the sales uplift at the stores based upon that footfall, and you can really start to get into the measurement side of it and start to attribute value. Now, I wouldn't say it's pure performance, because it's all modelled, and out-of-home is very much about modelled data and deterministic data. But you can start to see there that there is a big shift with this technology, which enables that kind of full funnel channel to be part of the future.
And is it important then for you to work with the different channels? And do you provide that reporting and measurement on your side, or is that relying on the buyer and their DSP for them to feed that information back to you and say, yeah, well, when we tied in out of home with, mobile targeting, location targeting, whatever it might be, is that relying on kind of like, again, that collaboration and that two-way conversation between yourselves and the client?
Yeah, we can very much kind of work with clients, with brands, with agencies in terms of data. We have a data solutions team in-house at JCDecaux, and we have a data corp team globally who can look at that kind of information. And really, that's probably best used for planning most of the time. And we can help with measurement. We are experts at measuring out of home, and we can certainly advise on that as well, about how you measure the channel. But the reality is it is best done from the buy side. It is best done from whoever's pulling the levers, working with the DSP who has that full holistic view of the campaign. Out of home, the reality is it is quite challenging to measure compared to some other online channels, and bridging that offline to online gap is certainly one of the challenges we face, and certainly one of the things that we are all very much working on, getting that closer to a real scalable solution. And that is happening, but the key to that at the moment really is combining channels. And because that view sits with the buyer, we're absolutely there to support, to recommend, to pull full reporting, back to the teams on the buy side to be able for them to do the analysis on their side.
And then just touching on the measurement side of things, are you being requested different elements or different attributes within the bid request from the clients, or is it a case when not much has changed in the information that you're passing, or are you adding to that? It'd be good to understand that side. And is that a little bit? I'm trying to think. Is that different, the information that you're passing in the bid request for digital out of home versus traditional media that you would have on your mobile or your desktop?
Yeah, it absolutely is different. I mean, out of home, like I said, it very much boils down to location and time. Our screens don't move, and the audiences kind of move around our screens. So in an out-of-home bid request, we're passing location, being long and lat. That's always bang on because the screen doesn't move. We are passing the type of environment it is, the frame size, whether it's banner or video. What we're not including there is kind of that more enriched information that perhaps you might see in other channels. So again, that is why it is so beholden on the DSP to start to match that information up on their side. I mean, one of the key benefits of that, though, is that really specific location. There isn't a margin for error. That is exactly where the screen is, and that's exactly when that ad has played out. So that kind of solid fixed point offers a real opportunity to build that into the wider ecosystem from planning, delivery, and a measurement perspective as well. Okay,
that makes sense. And then you touched on the pandemic and the impact that it had on your business, or just generally, you'd have less people out and about. It was as simple as that. Did you, when I suppose brands were coming back and spending on out of home, were there certain verticals that you saw kind of come in first and take that jump into digital out of home, or was it kind of across? Was it quite broad in terms of the verticals that would keep spending with you after the pandemic? Or, are we still in the pandemic? That's a question in itself.
Yeah, look, super interesting question. Well, 3 questions there, really. I think probably the most interesting trend we saw was actually the spend profile during the pandemic. So we saw a bit of a shift for some brands to programmatic digital out of home because it is more flexible, because you can flip it on, flip it off, you can move it around and chase the audience where the audience actually is when it isn't the same as kind of you would address traditionally. Interestingly, the top 2 verticals that we saw during the pandemic were retail, when no shops were open, and travel when no one was traveling. I thought it was really interesting to see that brands saw it as a way to mitigate risk, but still use a channel which is so important in having your brand visible and memorable and conveying that positive brand image. Once the kind of pandemic has kind of dissipated, if you like, and maybe I'll answer that final one next. I mean, in reality, we are seeing, from a revenue perspective, overall in the business, we're seeing a return pretty much to 2019, maybe not quite there yet. From a programmatic standpoint, it's hockey stick growth, which is fantastic, which is kind of what we'd expect. And a lot of that, it's very similar trends, that business that's returning and perhaps new business. It's very similar trends, I guess, to the rest of the market, right? So we are seeing a lot in tech and also a lot in the kind of new service delivery apps. So, think the likes of Gorillas, Getir, Zap, etc. These kind of new players, new disruptors in the market, which are also kind of coming to the fore.
I think that's an interesting point you made around the pandemic, because we know at the early stage, at least the first few months, brands were a little bit hesitant on running across online media, right? Because 9 times out of 10, the article would be around negative content, around COVID, and all brands didn't want to be in and around that. So in that sense, I suppose it kind of does make sense for you to still run digital out of home, because you're not in and around, even though it's in and around you, obviously COVID and the pandemic is amongst, offline as well as online, obviously it's there, but you weren't, your mindset wasn't reading or consuming a negative article and then seeing a brand. It was just a case where, it kind of, like, for me anyway, it's something that I haven't thought about, but it just works, right? Because you're not kind of associating the content to the brand. Would you say that's safe to say? And then it was never really brands coming to you. Like for us, whether we work in a contextual space or you work at a media owner or a publisher, they would have had, constant amount of requests coming in from agencies saying, take this off. We need to make sure that this isn't around negative content. Did you have less of those emails coming through at JCDecaux?
Ooh, I'm not sure if it really impacted us specifically in that way. I think sometimes, I love talking to people who work in kind of online contextual, because I heard a great quote at Programmatic Pioneers this year where someone said, contextual is not always contextual. And I think that's kind of right. We have to think about this kind of power, or this kind of dynamic between kind of online contextual and offline contextual. So when we're talking about context, we're very much talking about what's the weather, what's the stock market doing today, what are the football scores, what is the stock in the local stores. So that does impact. But what we don't have is, like you've just alluded to, we don't have articles next to a billboard saying this is an awful pandemic, watch out, lock up your daughters, whatever it may be. I also think it's really important to remember, if we're thinking about the pandemic, is that a lot of us, media folks like you and I, we were probably sat at home, on Teams, on Zoom, on whatever it may be. And that wasn't the case for a lot of the population, for core workers who are out there. Those audiences were still there. And we saw a massive push, certainly in the first few months. We saw some brands taking their branding budget and actually going, well, no, you know what? We can't pull the budget because we're committed, but we will switch that campaign to a charity campaign, or to advocate for the NHS, or to recommend good hygiene practices, which we thought was a really great move. And going one step further than that, I guess. So it's really important for out-of-home media owners and for JCDecaux, the public service element of what we do is absolutely core to the business. We were actually founded back in 1964, where Jean-Claude essentially, went to the mayor when they banned advertising in the city limits and said, look, your populace, they are waiting for buses and they're getting soaked, waiting for the buses to come. And at that moment, he basically proposed that he would build the bus shelters, he would fund them, he would pay for them, but in return to be able to monetize the advertising space. And that was the advent of that model. So if you've ever, sheltered from the rain in a bus stop, you're very welcome. That was us. But that public service element still runs true today. And that comes in several guises, right? So it comes in the real kind of hardcore infrastructure heritage, which we carry on. So, for example, we have attached to our screens, which we put in over the last 2 years, over 120 defibrillators, which are fully funded by the advertising. Every single one of those has been used. Every single one. So I'm not saying we're saving lives, but, there's a certain contribution to the community, which is so important to us. Where I'm going with this, and this kind of long and rambling answer, is that out of home is also fantastic at serving underserviced communities, at representing communities that perhaps aren't otherwise represented in media, because we live in the heart of the community we serve. So if you're advertising on, let's just say, a broadcast TV channel, for example, there is a section of the population, a demographic, whatever it may be, who are never going to watch that TV. Maybe it's not in their native language. Maybe it's not something their community watches. Maybe it's just not something they're interested in. And you can hit all of the mainstream channels and not actually reach that community. When you get into out of home, a programmatic out of home, you can actually target and service those communities, showing them within the content people who are representing their community, and even in the languages that they speak that perhaps aren't isn't native English within the UK, for example. So a bit of a long rambling answer from the start, but I think although the pandemic was tough and we got lots of phone calls and stuff moved around, it was actually really rewarding to be part of an industry, or part of the advertising industry, which gives something back to that community.
Yeah, it's that community feel, I think, that you would get from out of home, which you couldn't get from another channel, right? It's having that one-to-one, but also, like you said, at scale with a lot more people. It's very different to definitely any channel that I've ever worked on, and in the programmatic space. I think, definitely. I think the key word there you said is community. I think you get that community value, and like you said, when it comes to the measurement, you can really, really delve into the data and look at, what's working well in certain communities and not working so well in other communities. Is that the kind of information that you've passed back to brands? Is, we had this, in Wembley and we had this, the same brand pushing a different message in, another part of London. Is that the kind of information that you would feedback and get that granular when it comes to reporting back to brands?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very much so, and very much at probably more so at the planning stages that we would get involved, and we would leverage our data. And we quite often actually work with other media owners and kind of almost share that data when it's open source if it's required, if it works for the client. Post campaign, yes, absolutely, and in-flight optimization. So this isn't just post campaign. This is as things are happening. Again, this is one of the the great advantages of programmatic out of home is that you can make those changes and those tweaks in real time to make sure that that we are serving the right message to the right people and it's being accepted in the right way. I think it's really interesting that you kind of focused on that community element as well, which is so important. And we believe in the value of the public screen, and we talk about it a lot. And we believe it works very well with the private screen. We've done some research with the likes of Lumen, showing how those, if you combine those two channels, how you drive things like dwell time and attention. But also, there's something about the public screen, something about out of home. It's got the power, and we believe it's trust, right? So out of home is this one-to-many channel. You can see it, and I guess it's the big thing that you can't tell lies in public. Right. So whatever message you have, it almost instantly has that kind of robust sense of trust, which can really drive, those branding effects that we talked about at the top of the funnel. But also if you start to put that into the context of consideration, do you want to buy a brand that you trust, or do you just want to buy a brand that you've seen a lot? So it's again, leaning into the benefits of programmatic digital out of home.
Yeah, the trust is a good point as well. We're always within our space ask for screenshots, or you've always got the controversies in the past. There's an airplane's crashed, and then you've got a travel brand next to it. Where with I suppose out of home, it's so obvious. You just take a picture of it and you post it, right? Rather than constantly refreshing or going on to an article, coming back and literally trying to find a mistake for the brand or for the publisher, right? Because, there are people out there that want to look at a media owner or a publisher and say, look, it's not relevant what you're actually serving across your content, or what the brand is doing. Whereas this case, it's just so obvious. It's there for everyone to see. If you get it right, it's amazing. But if you don't get it right, it's purely obvious as well. So no, I think again that's a good point. I know you guys did a recent white paper in association with the Programmatic Advisory. It'd be great to understand a little bit more about that, what you wanted to achieve, and kind of some results behind that. Yeah,
sure. And I think that, it's a great segue that we're kind of talking about. Really, what we're talking about here is transparency. Right. And that was definitely something that the TPA wanted to kind of understand a bit more was, we all know Dan is a big advocate for transparency, and a great voice, I think, for our industry. But so we actually started off working with TPA to do a training module. So they have a programmatic university. Anyone can go on their website and they can educate themselves on programmatic from some real experts in the space. So we worked with them to kind of work on a training module, which was the fundamentals of programmatic digital out of home. Very much designed for digital marketers. It's free videos. They take about 25 minutes just to give you the absolute fundamentals. So you can get those first steps in and get yourself underway. And we were talking to them and we thought, well, how do we go about promoting this? And it was really obvious, right? So why not run a programmatic digital out of home campaign? And then the idea came to write a white paper off the back of it. So essentially what we did was we ran this campaign with our partners at Scooter, the DSP, and View, our SSP. And we essentially ran the campaign in London and Manchester, basically targeting digital buyers, DSPs, etc. And we used various creative variants, different colors. We use location callouts and dynamic creative in that sense. And then we optimized that in flight. And then we took the learnings from that campaign. It was a very, very niche campaign, but it drove side ups to the course, which was great to see that side of things. And really, when the TPA guys dug into the data as well, I think the key thing for them was what they were seeing from the DSP and from the SSP, from the publisher. It all tallied up. I think there was one metric that was like 0.6% out. So it's a really nice kind of look under the hood, if you like, of like a programmatic digital out-of-home campaign. And I really recommend it as a bit of reading, particularly for someone who's not 100% sure about what to do or how to take the next steps to move into the channel or to add it into their marketing mix. So I'd certainly say go and look at the white paper, download it, have a read, check out the training module. And of course, feel free to contact ourselves or TPA if you want more information and want to learn more.
Amazing. That sounds good. And I know a big part of the white paper and the study was around the QR codes. And is that where you see the future of digital out of home, around QR codes? Because I know there was a few years back, everyone was talking about the death of the QR code and they're not that useful. But now, since the pandemic and like now you go to the restaurant, you can pay, you can order your food all within a QR code, and I feel like they're here to stay now. Is that the same? Do you have the same opinion on that?
I mean, my personal opinion is actually a little controversial on this.
Okay.
I think the jury is still out. Weirdly, I think probably QR codes have more of a place perhaps in the traditional paper world. Just being really candid, the ads there longer, it's easier to scan. I think it's as simple as that. We are now seeing though an almost ubiquitous inclusion of QR codes, and I think that's good. But I think that sometimes, although that's a great idea, what you don't want to do is hang your entire strategy around it. Obviously, we did include QR codes, and that did give us some hard offline to online conversion metrics, which is fantastic, and they're in the white paper, and you can go and see those. I would say there's one exception. So we had a brand recently. I can't actually remember the name of the brand, which is awful. But they ran a fantastic campaign where the whole ad was just a QR code. I think something like that, absolutely fantastic, really, really exciting, creatively innovative. One thing I would say, and perhaps this is maybe where the direction of QR codes is probably going, or QR-alike codes. So we work with, I mentioned our data solutions team. We also have a creative solutions team in-house. And one of the things that they've kind of launched or have launched to market recently, and we expect to see grow, is AR, right? So you can scan the ad with your phone, and you start to get a kind of an augmented reality universe around the ad itself. I think that certainly is part of the future direction of travel. I would also caveat that I think everything I've just said is for the UK market. We don't, as much as other markets, walk around with our phones in our hands. We don't, even still, post-pandemic, as much as other markets, use QR codes. So in markets where they're completely ubiquitous, absolutely. In the UK, like I said, I think the jury's probably still out on that.
So you think there'll be different types of innovation coming in the space, not necessarily relying on QR codes, and then it depends on the market and the user adoption of how their their makeup is and how they're using their phones, for example.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And also, I think we were talking about media planning and buying, full stop, but particularly in programmatic digital out of home. Also, think about your KPIs, right? What are you actually doing with that QR code? Is it just a link to the website? If so, what's that website doing? Is it promoting content? Is it a push to purchase? Is it registering user details? Or are you doing something different with that QR code? Are you, like I said, creating an augmented reality via a phone that sits around it? Are you syncing audio to a video out of home ad? Again, that's something that's possible through QR codes. So I think the future of them, certainly in markets like the UK, is very much more how they link other technology to the out-of-home ad than perhaps just a kind of offline to online link to a website kind of approach.
Definitely, and we always finish off our podcast episodes with a question, which is what we feel is an interesting question. Whether our audience feels the same is a totally different conversation. But if you had a superpower in AdTech or tech, what would it be?
I would like a Men in Black style mind wiper, I think, just to kind of reset. I mean, programmatic out of home has gone through, a growth phase. Obviously, trade press is talking about programmatic out of home a lot, and it is part of the future. But I think we need to reset and just, focus the future based on facts and knowledge and experience. I think there's a lot of hyperbole out there. There's a lot of people, saying that it's the answer to everything. There's a lot of people saying that out of home is broken and programmatic is fixing it. None of that's quite true. I think we just need a mature attitude going forward based on knowledge, based on experience, and based on the facts that programmatic digital out of home can be part of a really exciting marketing mix in the future.
That's a great answer. Brilliant. No, thanks for your time today. It was great speaking to you. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Thanks, Dom, for your time.
Perfect. Cheers, Dal.